Perspectives on the history of book production, printing and typography. Shadows in our past. The book in New Spain. Soon after the Spanish conquest, New Spain became an associate kingdom of the Spanish Empire, a political conglomerate including the southern part of the United States, Mexico, Central America, and the Philippines. The specificity of New Spain expressed itself in different ways and with its own characteristics. The typographic press was by no means different, determined especially by the cultural and social background. However these particularities, the typographic press has not been studied. That is probably because the principal research line is directed towards the 16th century print, related especially with colonial significant figures like Juan Pablo, Pedro Valli, or Bernardo Calderón. The first books published in America are considered the most important, and for this reason they are named Mexican Incunabula. Although the research emphasizes differences between those books and the European production of the time, this appraisal forgets that the printing press arrived in 1539, almost 100 years after its invention. This tendency necessarily affects the valuation of other books produced during the colonial period. From this perspective, we can observe that one characteristic of the actual bibliographical knowledge in Mexico is the absence of the book's materiality. This situation also impacts historical knowledge. In fact, the objects have never been analyzed in every part of its structure after the time of the great bibliographic treatises, as for example in the work of Garcia y Casbalceto or Toribio Medina. For some reason, the study of the first books never considered the importance of comparing the specimens preserved of the same edition. If we make this work and we contrast the books produced in the 16th century in Mexico and Spain, we can find many similar aspects between the two products. The similarity is seen in the structure, which is derived from process of manual production and the place of the printing laws. This should not be strange because all first printers were Europeans, and they produced books for a public from the same territory. Only into the next century a new audience will be given for the book production. These objects acquire distinctive characteristics that reflect cultural, social, and economic values of the society in New Spain. The social values also live in typographic workshops, but this space is one of the hollow in our past. Today we have few information about how worked the commercial network of consumables like paper, types, and ink. The same occurs with the books commerce in and out New Spain and Europe. We do not know too much about the history of the men who did these books. There are few studies of the editors and their workshops, mostly of the 16th century. The same occurs with the journeymen printing and their professional development, not to mention their families or their knowledge transmission by members of the same guild. The entire first printers had stories of business success. For example, except Cornelio Adriano Cesar, who had serious problems with the Inquisition. Because of this situation, he had never been able to mount his workshop with the press and materials he had brought from Europe. Other tendencies in the studies are based in assertions made on secondary sources. Therefore, many documents and books are not considered. To solve these problems, we must establish how the bibliographic production was made in New Spain, especially those books in which we can appreciate the Hispanic norms by which they were produced. Books must be studied in relation with the revision of the documentation that shows the different facets of the cultural writing. Undoubtedly, the data we recollect would show how the new Spanish books were done in the line proposed by the Spanish crown. For this condition, books acquire their specific materiality and distinguish themselves from the Spanish norm. Even though the forms of production and types of laws had the same conditions in both territories, the material results are different. What are the reasons for this peculiarity? Although we do not know how was the complete process for printing a book in New Spain, it is important to underline that this norm never changed until the Cadiz Courts in 1812. Mexico, as an independent nation, has a noble tradition in bibliographical knowledge that we can follow since the 18th century. It is regrettable that this tradition was lost after 1960s. Consequently, the analysis of the books like material objects stopped for not having any interest. In addition, we have to consider the poor situation of inventory of the old books in all the country. Fortunately, some institutions have made significant progress in their own catalogs. It is possible to consider using conjointly these instruments in the future. But for now, we do not know for sure if some books in one institution are the same specimens in another different institution. We are confronted to a complete universe of historical sources that need to be reconsidered on several other reporters. The most important problem in this argument is to understand the place of the book and their impact in the society of New Spain, but also to know how worked the market price of the books, both new and used. It is important to understand the relationship between this price and the cost of production because the books had a controlled price by the Spanish crown. Other aspect is the number of production and if this was exclusively for local trade. This point, in part, explains the themes and forms of the bibliographic production. For example, the important number of the texts dedicated to preaching and learning indigenous languages. Indeed, this consideration can be related to the study of colonial libraries, private and institutional ones, because the documents testify the circulation of locally printed books. New perspectives in the studies of book history are pertinent right now to contribute to the evaluation of the bibliographical legacy and especially for understanding the rich cultural life of New Spain. In this context, the books, like other cultural objects, were crucial in the construction of prejudices and dreams, thoughts and ideas, and so on. Two main objectives are pursued here. One, to improve cultural studies of our past, and two, to recover the importance of book materiality and original documents. In order to obtain this information, we need to establish a collaborative dialogue between disciplines like history, and information studies. One reality of the study presented here seems fairly optimistic, but we believe that in some years we can change these tendencies and wrong appreciations of the history of the book in New Spain. Certainly, there are a lot of work to do in libraries and archives, and sooner or later we are going to start. Thank you very much for your kind attention.